Good afternoon, webinar participants. Welcome once again to our Thursday afternoon, 3 o'clock webinar. We have a really interesting topic today, but before I get into the topic and introductions, let me very quickly go through the logistics of using the Zoom interface that we're on today. And I want you to look to the bottom of your screen. You should see a Q&A icon. During the course of the webinar, if you have any questions at all, please type your questions into the Q&A icon. We have been pretty successful answering all questions during the webinar lately. So hopefully we will get all questions answered. Don't worry about having to take notes. Everything that you see and hear today will be accessible to you via a recording. The webinar will be recorded, and if we use any slides during the course of the webinar, those slides will be available to you via our Google Docs page. So not to worry, you'll get an email with links to everything, and that will be available to you probably within the next 24 hours. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and talk about what we're doing today. As usual, Steve Denny will be giving us an update. The update's not great. Not that much today, but Steve will tell us what we know new since last week relative to the CARES Act and other COVID legislation. But we have a really interesting guest today. We have with us as our guest panelist, Scott Swindler of Chick-fil-A. And we're going to hear an interesting story of how he's managed through COVID in his business. So with that said, Steve, the microphone is yours.
Great, Marquita. Thank you very much. And as always, Marquita, we're so blessed to have you give us your Thursday afternoons to moderate this for you. We appreciate it very much. Well, folks, as those of you that watch the news may have seen, the Senate came back into session this week and began to deliberate round 4 of the aid bill. They are working on what they call kind of an aid light, and it seems to be that the stalemate still seems to be in place on Capitol Hill with Nancy Pelosi and the Congress on one side still holding out for a large $3.5 trillion fourth tranche of aid. The senators seem to be fixated on a number of 1 trillion or less, and the administration saying that they would accept anything up to 1.5 trillion. So, you know, I think from speaking with a couple of the bankers over the course of the last couple of weeks, banks, PPP lenders, I should say, are highly optimistic that there will be a fourth tranche and that there will be some modifications that take place to the existing PPP program and potentially even a reauthorization of the PPP because there was a lot of money left over. So never thought I'd be saying this, but here we are in the middle of September, and hold on to your hats. It looks like there may be more to come on COVID-19 aid, and you can count on IBA bringing it to you just as quickly as we hear. So that's the short update on where we are, Marquita. I want to underscore what you said earlier. We are honored and really excited to have Scott Swindler with us today. Scott is the local Chick-fil-A restaurant owner and operator, and Scott has very graciously agreed to give us an hour of his time to talk a little bit about what they've done. Anybody throughout the country that lives within any close distance to a Chick-fil-A, I'm sure has admired what your company has done in terms of coping with this COVID-19 and all the things that you guys have had to do to survive and pivot and then begin to thrive again in that. But Scott, I'd really like to start by having you, if you will, just share with us, how'd you first get to Chick-fil-A? It's, you know, when we're talking with business owners and people that want to buy franchises, Chick-fil-A is always in the top 2 or 3 of the highly desired franchises. And we tell people that that's not something that you know we can help them with, that's something that has to go a different way. So would you mind sharing with us your story, how you got involved with Chick-fil-A?
Sure. And thanks, Steve and Marquita and everyone for joining us and for having me. And it's an honor to be here and spend this time with y'all. Yeah, the truth, Steve, is I'm not sure. So it is a difficult process, and one of that I obviously was successful in navigating, but one that I've referred many folks to, and for one reason or another that I have no idea they have not been successful. So I often compare and go, why me? So I was a career in the management role with Enterprise Holdings, local company. I started with Enterprise right out of college. Attended Truman State University and was actually a pre-med student, and just was like, does that really where my heart's taking me? So I decided I was gonna spend a year or two just trying to figure that out, and joined Enterprise. And 13 years later, the last 6 days, I was a regional manager in Illinois, covering in almost the entire state outside of Chicagoland. So the Bloomington, Peoria, Champaign, Rockford, Springfield type market. 51 locations of the then tri-branded rental car brands under the EHI Holdings when they had purchased National and Alamo. And really in that path, it was time to move again. It was just kind of the way the company was built, is built. I would suspect again, or still, is that you need to be willing to go when they have an opportunity. And so we had moved several times already, and we're living in Central Illinois. And I just kind of looked around and was like, I really would be interested in doing my own thing and calling a place home for more than a couple of years. And so I truly looked at many opportunities, but one of those was Chick-fil-A, simply because they did not have one in Bloomington Normal where we were living at the time. And in that process, I raised my hand for that area, and raised my hand for St. Louis, being born and raised in the St. Charles area, my wife being from South County. And we really just had the opportunity to navigate through the process of the interviews. And then on the Chick-fil-A side, they switched gears a little bit. So that process ended up taking about two and a half years, 13 either phone or face-to-face interviews. And it's a unique opportunity in that they build the locations, and then they select an owner operator. And so had no idea where I was really looking for the business opportunity for. So was very fortunate and blessed to have the opportunity back home in the St. Louis metro area, the Wentzville location. To be honest with you, Steve, when they mentioned that to me, they initially, I wasn't sure. And then I did a little research and began to understand that it was the fastest growing area in the state, and probably still is today. And gave me an opportunity to really understand that was a great fit. So that's really how that worked out. Food was not a desire per se. Business opportunity, the right partnership in the franchise. And once anyone is immersed in the Chick-fil-A culture that has the same values, it's really there's no change in your mind at that point. So that's a little bit of how that happened. And it's been 6 years now, 6 years this month, that I've been the owner operator of the location there. I do have a satellite location up at Truman State University, ironically, that they have contracted me to help with. And so that's where I spend my days for sure.
So it sounds like you've been able to sleep in your own bed for every night for the last 6 years for a change, huh?
Yes. I being able to build roots and community, and meeting different folks in the community, and just building the business locally has been awesome.
Yeah, and you are really quite a leader in the community. So everybody knows Scott, and you just have such an outstanding, stellar reputation. We're honored to have you in the community. So Chick-fil-A has got world renowned as one of the most arduous processes for selecting their folks. And I imagine they have very, very little turnover in their owner ranks and their management ranks of their company. Can you speak to that at all, Scott? Is that true?
It is true, Steve, and I think that's one of the, I can speak to the process they use. They use a process that's modeled after it's actually a book written. It's called Who, or The Who. I can't quite remember, but it's called the top grading process. And so it's long and it's drawn out and it's repetitive for a reason. They, you know, I know going through the process and it being 2.5 years, you know, building some relationships on the selection side of things, you know, they told me several times, you know, it's important that they get it right and we get it right. So it's not, it's a mutual relationship, and the turnover and I've heard statistics of less than 5%. So often it's, you know, something that folks retire from, and you know, it's an amazing culture, and they're highly selective, and it shows.
It really does. It really does. Well, that's awesome. Thanks for shedding a little light on that. And it is, it's interesting. I had never heard you say before that you had recommended many people in, and they were not able to make it through the other side. So I you know, my family had a history in the McDonald's franchise, and I got a couple of cousins that own a whole number of stores in that area. And boy, you talk about a nepotism environment. I mean, the only way in is to know somebody in that environment. And it sounds like Chick-fil-A is perhaps not that way.
It's truly interesting. You know, they do reach out, you know, in general, they'll say, hey, you know, we're opening this many stores, but they hold the cards when it comes to where they're going to do the real estate deals. It's a very unique franchise opportunity in that piece, right? You know, they build them, and then they select someone to come in and be the owner operator and run the brand. There's no equity stake in the property itself, which is really unique. But the rare operator has 3 locations. There's a handful. There's a few more, but still probably, you know, less than 150 that have 2 locations, and the majority are 1 location owner operators, just because the model is that the operator is hands-on day to day. It's not an investment and manage from afar type model, and I think that's what makes it effective. I really do. And so certainly I have the hopes to have more than 1, but what's interesting is they would need to build 1 within 5 miles of my first location. And so again, we're back to Chick-fil-A has to decide that they want to do that. So it's unique, but you know, I often get the question, Steve, you know, oh, you only have 1, and it's like, well, yes, and be careful what you wish for, because you know the volume that we do is about 4. You know, you mentioned McDonald's, 4 McDonald's under 1 roof, if you will. So,
yeah, that's the secret. People don't realize that the average Chick-fil-A is typically 4x what the next best franchise is in the food marketplace. So, you know, many of these fast food locations owners will own more than 1, but they still don't come anywhere near what you're producing in terms of revenues.
Certainly, yeah, it's really mind blowing. It is, Steve, and we, you know, I looked the other day in the month of July and most of August, we averaged over 2,000 transactions a day in our Wentzville location. And, you know, even in the St. Louis metro area, you know, I'm maybe 5th or 6th in volume. I think that I read something the other day, they expect the top Chick-fil-A location in the country to do over $15 million in revenue this year. So just unbelievable results and unbelievable systems and processes that are allowing that to happen. And of course, it wouldn't be possible without just the brand reputation and the guests coming, and you know, it starts there. So.
Well, it's astounding to me. I mean, as you know, my wife and I are empty nesters, and we probably eat out at least 4, maybe 5 days a week, right? And that's been really challenging over the last 6 months. But we've seen lots of new restaurants that have opened up in the area that you and I live in, and nobody has the guest experience and the consistently high quality that Chick-fil-A delivers. And that's the differentiator. And it just keeps bringing people back for more. You know,
It does. I agree.
It's astounding. My grandkids, you know, I grew up as a McDonald's kid, right? When I was a young man, McDonald's was a place. Now it's my grandkids. The only place they ever want to go to is Chick-fil-A. They don't even know any other places.
And you know, you hit it from a marketing perspective. I have for the last 6 years geared towards the youth in the area, because we all know that they're the ones that dictate for sure. Well,
Steve, while you're on the subject of talking about how pleasant your experience is at dinners, you know, Scott, I don't know if you can give us an insider's perspective, but I am always impressed when I do go to Chick-fil-A that not only are the people so polite, pleasant, courteous, the customer service is phenomenal, but I even come out with an improved attitude. And I've often laughed or wondered, I'm visualizing that as you onboard people as employees in the organization, that you put them through this matrix, sort of a brain fix. I am just unbelievably impressed, but want to know, where do you find the people and how do you get that consistency of attitude? Is it something you do after you hire them, or is it something in the hiring process? I'm just so curious.
Well, you know, I get that question a lot, actually. And you know, you hear the word culture, and it's a big word, and it's a tough word to define sometimes, but it is truly something that we've built, and I think brand wise and location specific, that, you know, it starts from the top down. It starts from the message from the franchise and the Chick-fil-A Inc. and the brand itself, and then certainly, you know, I try to continue that message, build that message as the local owner operator, bring in my team of leaders that are around me, who many of which, almost all of them actually, have been there for the whole time I have, and so that then just starts to perpetuate the culture. And I often say anymore that we hire the local, you know, high school student or whoever it might be, and they really don't have a choice. It's in that they're going to stand apart differently if they don't understand that, hey, this is what we do. This is to be a part of the culture. You know, it becomes a normal my pleasure, or the polite demeanor, the sharing, the smile. You know, we certainly talk about it. We talk about the visions and values in the interview process. You know, what's interesting is we have a very low turnover rate, especially for the industry. And I know certainly in Wentzville, probably not as competitive as maybe a central county, like a West County or somewhere more central in the, but I really don't have a problem hiring. I have, you know, I bet I have 100 applications sitting there that I can't touch right now. And that's an ongoing basis. And so I have a lot of cousins, brothers, sisters, mom, dad, you know, niece, nephew, tremendous amount of families. And so I think that speaks a lot to what we do, what we provide, because we have a lot of referrals from family members and things like that. And, you know, yes, it is part of the training process. It is part of the interview process. We're very stringent because we can be. You know, we're quick to adapt if someone breaks that culture. I mean, it's just, we're not gonna tolerate it, and we have the ability to do that. But more often than not, our retention is very, very good. And it is one of those things where, again, that word culture, we live it, they're immersed in it, and they start to follow it, and it perpetuates.
It's amazing. And you guys you know, you guys living it really does make a huge difference. To Marquita's point, it's so infectious, even the customers go away happier. So it's what keeps us coming back. But listen, nobody's immune from this Chinese visitor we had, and we all got this surprise visit. And you know, you being in a location where people tend to congregate with a high density, and you're not essential, all of a sudden your business gets shut down. Give us an overview. What was the initial impact and shock like within your organization?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, just like anyone, I mean, we had the fear of the unknown. You know, and you actually brought up a good point, Steve. Where were we essential? Were we not essential? You know, that wasn't defined at first. And so we actually never shut down because we started, you know, Chick-fil-A Inc. and many of the advisors on that side decided that we were essential. And so, you know, but as the local owner operator, you know, you start hearing about cases of COVID, and you start hearing about, you know, just the fear and there was this fear and this unknown and this, you know, I think Chick-fil-A in the South County, good friend of mine, the owner operator down there, they were one of the first public cases in the area. He had a team member test positive early on, and it was like he was blackballed for a while. Man, we were right there alongside of him, you know, lifting him up and trying to make sure that we could help in any way we could. But he experienced the early, you know, oh no, you had someone that was positive. And now we know today that, you know, there's many cases out there and businesses that have been impacted. But seeing that was certainly the mentality of, oh, I don't want to be the one. And so, you know, so we start hearing government decisions, you know, hearing things like CARES Act, Family First Act, PPP, ERC, laws, health employment protocols, you know, all of those things. And nobody really had the answer, but it was, you know, and I think any business owner understands that it was really a tough moment. But what made it hard for us is that you said it, Steve. We had public coming in, and you know, increasing the risk. And how do we navigate that? That was one of the big things early on. And so one of the first decisions we made, and we collaborate as a market often, but one of the first decisions we made was to close our dining room, even though they didn't tell us we had to yet.
And that had to be a significant portion of your revenue. So at the time, you probably had, you know, I'm just making numbers up. Maybe you've got 40% drive-through and 60% dine-in, something like that?
Yeah, it's close to that, Steve. It's about 35, 65. And
Wow.
So absolutely, it was a decision to really, but, you know, I think as any business leader, during a time of uncertainty, during a time of you know, like we just experienced and are experiencing, you know, the first thought is, okay, the safety of my team, safety of our guests, protecting the brand, and, you know, certainly being a good steward of everything that's entrusted to us in that brand, as well as being a good community partner, following the lead of the health department, the local government, those types of things. And, you know, so navigating that was, you know, like I'm sure many business leaders, I spent a tremendous amount of my time, you know, on webinars, understanding what all of this meant and how to navigate it, and understanding, you know, what those steps should be. So for sure.
How did the impact affect your team? Because I know you've got, you know, your base team members, you have a lot of high school students, as you talked about. They're under the influence of their parents and their other family members and community. So I would think that the impact on your team was pretty severe as well.
It was. And one of the early decisions we made outside of closing the dining room was that we were going to, well, I wanted to make sure I had an understanding, because again, we all know nobody had the answer, but the local health department had a lot of influence on how we were going to navigate this. And so I talked to him once a week, and I tried to understand, hey, what is your take on this? If I do have a positive case, how do I navigate this and not have to close my doors? And so it's kind of two angles. We went from that was part of the conversation. The other part of the conversation was, hey, what are the best practices in order to keep my team and my guests safe? And in the background, Chick-fil-A was working on that same question, and undoubtedly having a stellar business partner like Chick-fil-A was extremely valuable in this process. But at the local level, we still had the local navigation to execute on. And so one of the early decisions was I split my team into 2 teams, and so I included myself and then my executive director. And we for lack of better terms, we had a fantasy draft, or a balanced, pick, 6th grade kickball pick 'em, and we just went down and we tried to balance out, how do we make this happen with 2 teams to where our 2 teams don't touch each other. So if one team had a positive case and we had to quarantine that entire team for 14 days, how could we sustain business? And so we did that. That was one of the early things that we did, and being open in only 6 days was helpful, because we were able to do 3 days each and have a pattern there. The second thing we did in the restaurant is we developed several safety protocols. What's interesting about, in the restaurant business, we always washed our hands, we always sanitized, we always, that was always part of what we did. But this has certainly upped our game, but it also involved things like, typically you're not wearing gloves if you're not touching food. You're just touching packaging or a cup or drinks, things like that. And so, glove usage and tray usage in order to hand meals off, and all of those things started coming into play. And I think as we talked about those items and the 2 teams and how we made that work, the bigger topic was like, hey, we're going to have to innovate, and we're going to have to influence our team members in order to get them to lead them through this process of the unknown. And like you said, we had many high schools, I had team members that said, hey, I'm not comfortable working. But my goal, and we were actually very successful in this, was to not have to close the business so that I could keep people employed, so that I could keep keep them from having to go the unemployment route, to keep them from having to make decisions for their family. And so, I going into the 2-team system, Steve, I ended up, my labor costs went up.
Sure.
And so it was one of those things where it was important to me I'm running this business in the long term, and I want to make sure my team was able to support their family during this.
What a key comment. I just want to underscore that. Running the business for the long term.
Certainly.
So having faith that this is going to pass. Wow. What a perspective.
Someday, right?
Yeah,
we've learned a lot. But and I think I'll just continue. We talked about how do we innovate and how do we influence the team. And first we kind of outlined, hey, we have to think safe. What are the safety protocols that we need to bring into play here that we don't currently have? We need to think different, just kind of in that standpoint of, hey, our dining room's closed. How do we do this different than we've done it before? And then, I wanted to make sure we thought personal. How are we going to take care of our team? How are we going to take care of the guests and be a beacon of light in the community when there's so many unknowns, and continue to serve them? And I think, really successfully navigating that process through just trying to think in those buckets. Our business, we had a record month in the month of June. Then we beat it in July. and then we came darn close in August.
So let me make sure, let me hit the pause button a second here and make sure I understand what you just said, Scott. So 65% of your business is in the dining room and that goes away, right? You've got to raise your labor costs because you've got to have 2 independent teams that operate completely independent, which I'm sure increases your training and support that you've got to put on that as well. All of probably your paper goods and other consumable expense just went up through the roof because now you've got to have PPE and, various trays and other, cleaning regimens. So all of your operating costs are exploding at the same time, but you had record months in
Yes.
June, July, and approaching that again in August.
Yes, we, blessed, amazed, I think because of the trust that we've built with the brand over time, and the active approach of reaching out to the health department, understanding the CARES Act, understanding the Family First Act, communicating with the team and making sure that they understood, hey, this is the plan that I have, guys. I sent out, weekly, probably multiple times a week, letters to the team, just trying to ensure that they knew that, hey, I'm looking at these things. I understand that this is a time of just stress and chaos. And so, I think through that process, I got a lot of great feedback on just, hey, you really helped us feel better about coming to work. Knowing that you were looking out for our safety, looking out for just us as individuals. And so there were some decisions, there were some, I don't know. There were some decisions as a business owner that you don't normally make, for sure. But I think, the time called for it. And so those are the decisions we had to make, and the guests kept coming. And so it gave me an opportunity to keep people employed, to actually keep a need for people every day. And so it was definitely, it's been amazing. It's been good. And I think not the opposite was the fear, right? I applied for the PPP, and then I ended up giving it back, because I just, the decision was, how can I justify that when we're doing as well as we can be? And, but it was kind of an insurance policy, and the thought of applying for it, and I had it, and I gave it back. And that was a tough decision because I certainly could have had that forgiven. But I think it was the right decision. And, I had the other options of ERC credits and things like that. So, certainly those have been there to help support and offset some of that increased labor that we experienced. I
want to hit the pause button one more time, Scott. You said something that is unbelievably profound, and I think you raced right through it. And I want to make sure that we underscore this point and that people hear it. All this is going on. The world's coming to basically a standstill around you. You've got all of this activity that you've got to do as a business owner to reposition your business and deal with the situation. And at the same time, you began a process of over communicating with your people to keep your people informed of what was going on and keeping them engaged. So instead of putting your head in the sand and, doing what we call the ostrich syndrome, you actually increased your level of communication to your people to keep them informed and engaged in the solutions. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's one of those things, there's so much uncertainty, and if there's ever time to lead, it was then, it's now. And, I felt like that was one way where I could lead the team, because they, my team, they have families, and they're concerned for themselves and their health, and all of those things, just like all of us. And navigate unknown, you know, is certainly not where you want to be. Yeah, and there were major companies. I'm sure you got the emails just like I did from major companies out there and CEOs, and you know, and so I certainly didn't create the model, but you know, I thought it was important that my team and you know, we communicated out to our guests, hey, here are the things we're doing to try to keep you safe. You know, we are open. You know, we're keeping our team safe. We're keeping the, you know, we did some things that we're no longer doing now that we understand the virus a little bit more. But you know, I should have bought stock in selfie sticks, because we have our credit card swipes outside, and those things are not made for a lot of pressure. But man, we were going through them, it seemed like daily, just to keep, you know, some distance between our order takers and our guests, and you know, just provide the safest and environment that we could for everyone. But you know, that was just one example of hey, how do we do this differently? You know, how do we think safe? How do we think different? And you know, at the same time, how do we protect everyone?
It's amazing. I cannot think of another restaurant, particularly a fast food restaurant with a drive-through, that has reacted like you guys have. In terms of, you guys have multiplied drive-through lanes, you've done, you know, drive-up ordering, you've taken spaces in your shopping centers, additional spaces. And, you know, in many cities, you've probably created traffic nightmares. I know you certainly have in Wentzville, but it's the customers are flocking to your facilities to get great product and do so with confidence.
Yeah.
But none of your competitors are doing that.
Well, you know, I think one of the questions we asked is, okay, where are we and how do we use what we have, and do what we can with it. And so, closing the dining room, what we had is now we have more space. Okay. So we have demand. How do we now think throughput? And so, that was part of that whole thought process is, okay, well, how can we serve guests? And you know, I have to say, we were lucky in that our brand was forward thinking enough to already have a really good app product for guests to be able to order curbside and to be able to you know, order ahead and do some of those. We already had the usage of the iPads out in the drive-through lanes and things like that. And so now, how do we just multiply that effort? And so we set some goals as a team on just throughput, knowing that the demand, you know, guests were trading down, guests were showing trust in the brands. And again, I think it goes back to just how we build the brand on a local level in the community with local owner operators. You know, so then it became a question of how do we make this experience one that it's not, you know, a drive-through line wrapped around the block and it's not moving. And so that became a huge challenge to the team and kind of a rallying cry of, hey, people are telling us they trust us. How do we keep everyone employed and do it in a way that, you know, we can serve guests and you know, be a great experience. And so we doubled, you know, I bought double the amount of iPads I had. I bought more credit card swipes. I mean, we invested heavily into the technology side. I invested into some, you know, just I provided shorts and you know, dry fit, yeah, you sun protection shirts for everyone. You know, it was kind of that question of, are we playing to win here, or are we playing to not lose? And, you know, sometimes we ask that question. Okay, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen. Is this the time to really spend all of this capital on, you know, uniforms that employee could quit tomorrow? But you know, it was the right thing to do for the team and the heat, and it was the right thing to do to just pay for it, not ask them to pay for them, but provide them the opportunities, provide them the sunscreen, provide them the cooling vests and the ice packs, and you know, all those things. Because the reality is, our business shifted to the outdoor elements, and so right now I'm thinking, hey, what do we do in the winter? I'm trying to secure some outdoor shelters, which is becoming very difficult. They're not out there right now, for at least for a price that, you know, we want to pay. But, you know, so I've contacted some local contractors. Hey, can you build me something? You know, I got the winter coming. We're going to be an outdoor business for a while. We do not anticipate opening our dining room anytime soon. And that is truly a local decision. Chick-fil-A has said we could, but I don't understand, you know, I just don't feel right, I guess, about why I would increase the risk for my team at this point. And so we're going to continue to operate outside only. And so we added some positions, we added some throughput positions with, you know, outside the window. We added some cash, you know, and payment positions. And like you said, Steve, we had some, I mean, they don't look the greatest, but we had some local signs made at, you know, Office Max or wherever, and just put them out throughout the parking lot to make sure the guests knew what the options were. So
I'm curious, was the city and the shopping center owners and so forth, were they cooperative, or did you find that you had to convince them to you know, see things your way?
So it's interesting. I started out with the approach of we'll ask for forgiveness later. You know, I think we're a good community partner.
Without question.
We're a good community partner with Home Depot. We're a good community partner with the city of Wentzville, the county, and so that the conversation actually has not come up. I think I did hedge the conversation and make sure that the real estate department at Chick-fil-A knew what we were doing in case they got the question. But we've been very fortunate, quite honestly. I haven't had to deal with anyone at those levels coming to me and saying, hey, we don't like that you did that. So.
Well, that's a blessing. Scott, is there anything as you guys were pivoting and doing all of these new things, was there anything that you tried that didn't work that you had to pivot again and do something a little bit differently, or did you guys have a pretty good batting average on all the things you put in play?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, a small example was the selfie sticks. Those did not work. But you know, I think as we were we changed our operational plan. I mean, we absolutely tried things that didn't work. Just, you know, on how we set up our positioning with our team and how we scheduled. You know, we learned some things. You know, it used to be that we would have some, you know, a lunch peak and then kind of a valley and then a dinner peak, and that was the day. Well, during this process, we don't have, you know, there's still peaks, but we don't really have the valleys. And so we learned a lot, and that, hey, we need to understand that guests are still I mean, there's a tremendous amount of trust out there, and we absolutely benefited, you know, undoubtedly, unfortunately, I would say, from other restaurants being closed. I mean, you know, I'm not naive enough to think that we didn't, you know, and that's an unfortunate situation. I hate to see that, but, you know, I think we took the mentality of, hey, you know, maybe we have some guests that are trying us for the first time. So how do we make sure that they understand what we're all about? It starts with great food, great product.
Yeah, make sure they get a Pete's Shake and they'll be back every day, right?
Yeah. Yes, the seasonal items are very popular. I understand that. So but you know, I think, Steve, to just follow up, certainly, you know, I think when you have a brand that's as strong as ours is right now, honestly, I spend a lot of my time in the innovation space of how do we do this better. I actually contracted a third-party company to fly a drone over my building for an hour, just so I could understand where the gaps were, where the choke points were, in the process of trying to understand, hey, where is it that I do need to change the process, understand the process better, and having a drone overhead as you see cars line up over a peak time, it'll tell you a lot. And, you know, it was one of those things too, where I was able to take that back to the team and say, and really show them, hey, you know, when we do have that car at the window that, you know, what, lots of reasons, you know, they're waiting on something special or a shake, or they had something on and they're sitting there for a minute. Our average is 15 seconds window time. Every 15 seconds, we're averaging a car through that window. So when you take a car and you leave them there for a minute, that's 3 cars I can't serve, maybe even 4, depending. And, you know, when you multiply that check average and you just do the law of averages. And so it's really a mentality shift to help the team understand, hey, we're going to serve that guest in a great way. Let's go ahead and make that decision to have them go over and park over in the parking lot. I know we think that's a loss, but that's actually a huge win, because the 3 guests behind them now just got served in a lot better fashion as well. So, so really just going through that shift and that mentality, that was a learning process for us, that we found successful.
Yeah. What advice would you give to another business owner, you know, having gone through this? I don't know whether you've stopped to think about this much, but you are really an outstanding example of really, you know, trying to figure out what it's going to take to survive, pivot your systems and processes, be willing to put anything up for change that's necessary to meet your vision and mission of serving your clients with outstanding products in the outstanding culture. What particular advice would you give to other business owners? What have you learned that will make you a better owner moving forward?
That's a good question. I think I'm just gonna, you know, I'll go back to just kind of the mentality that, you know, that took hold, and it's a mentality I keep a lot. You know, it's just that, how are we innovating? How am I innovating? How am I thinking different? Thinking, you know, the CEO of Chick-fil-A always says, thinking cool. You know, how are we always thinking ahead on what's next? And, you know, one piece I really didn't even mention is we added delivery service in this whole process. You know, Domino's meets Chick-fil-A. I have delivery drivers now that are taking single meals out to guests. And, you know, you've heard of the Grubhubs and the DoorDash and the Uber Eats.
Sure.
And, you know, we just really felt like it was an opportunity where we could do it better with our people. You know, and again, everybody can judge for themselves, but, you know, some of those are less than desirable experiences with those third-party companies. And, you know, they do serve a purpose, and there's a projected $20 billion industry within that realm. And so it was like, okay, how do we do that? People are at home right now. So I now have 3 delivery vehicles, and I'm delivering meals every day. And that started and accelerated during this process. And so, again, you know, for me, it was a leap of faith to throw capital into the business and understand that this is a long-term vision. And I think long-term guests are going to tell you, you know, in my business, they're going to tell me what they want. And economically, people were spending money. You know, I talked to the Home Depot manager. They had record sales. You know, I could see it every day. People were out spending money. And so when they're doing that, they're willing to pay a delivery fee or an inflated menu price or whatever it might be. And they were bringing their families through. So we were seeing that. And, you know, but I think, you know, just always thinking, how can we innovate and how can we influence? And in this time, it was those 3 buckets of just really kind of, okay, how do we think safe? How do we think different? How do we think personal for our guests and our team? And in general, a lot of times when we think about what's next, it's, you know, hey, where are we, and how do we use what we have? And then, you know, how do we, you know, understand? And so I'm actually, while I may not open my dining room, I'm actually right now thinking about, how do I create a kiosk of some sort outside in order to do carryout orders? Because every day I have a large truck or someone pulling a trailer or whatever walk up, and we don't do that well. They don't fit in the drive-through. They don't have the app for curbside. And so it's a missed opportunity that we just don't do well. You know, we serve them, but it's not well. So how do we do that differently? How do we create a kiosk that they've never seen before? You know, I'm thinking also, how do I create like a cash only lane? So that, because the cash transaction is the slowest transaction. And so how do I create a lane specific for cash and keep these other 2 lanes streamlined as much as possible? And so I think we, you know, just, you got to think about innovation and how you can continue to adapt and serve. And we may never open our dining room. There's certainly a lot of owner operators in the brand, and I've talked to other QSR owners that have said the same thing. This is the most efficient we've ever served guests, and we're seeing, you know, record volumes and sales and things like that. But to me, that's, you know, that's great. That's obviously, I mean, that is a goal, but, you know, for us, it's, you know, really, how do we focus on serving? The demand is strong in our brand, and how do we focus on serving the guests in a better way?
Excellent, excellent, Scott. A lot of people,
or Steve, if I could jump in a minute, because while, you know, Scott just talked about innovation and resourcefulness, which I think is key. And, you know, as we've had other guests on this webinar, we've seen a trend in the ones who are truly prospering through this COVID. It's called for adapting, being innovative, and being resourcefulness. Scott, what I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about is where you get that innovation and resourcefulness from. Is it you? Is it your team? How does that work in the context of what you're doing? Because some of these ideas are amazing ideas that I think in many instances, you know, food service and restaurant businesses have not considered. And your team, you and your team have come up with these great ideas, and you're still innovating at this point in time. Tell us a little bit about that, and you know, who are the idea people?
Sure. I think, you know, I think when, again, we talk about the brand and the uniqueness of Chick-fil-A, one of the, you know, what makes them successful, one of those is that they, you know, because of the owner operator local relationship, they give us a lot of entrepreneurial runway. And some of the best ideas that you see chain wide, an example of that is the outdoor iPad order taking. That started with one operator really trying it and saying, hey, we'd like to do this. We think this would grow our business. And now others have adapted that. And, you know, so I think while it's a national brand, and certainly there are some brand guidelines, one of the reasons they're successful is they do rely heavily on the owner-operator group to really say, hey, this is what will make our life better. And, you know, the brand, the leadership of the brand themselves think differently as well. I mean, I'll give you a quick example. The lemonade that we serve, we still today hand squeeze every lemon that goes into that. But for years, of course, operationally, we've said, hey, there's got to be a better way. I mean, it's so labor intensive. I mean, we're squeezing 20 cases of lemon every day. We're putting probably 7 labor hours towards it. And those are the people that are really good at it, right? And so the brand just built a first of its kind, first in the world facility out in California, robotics to be able to send us high pressurized lemon juice, but they wanted to do it in a way that was going to keep the recipe original and unique and what it is. And so they're thinking different, they're thinking innovative, and I think that we talked about culturally before. They highly influence the ability and give us the opportunity to think differently. And that's one of the things I love. One of the reasons I love what I do. I get to spend a lot of my time in the space of vision and where are we going next, and what's working well, what's not working well, and how do we pivot and how do we shift. And And so certainly after that point, I same thing, just like Chick-fil-A is asking us for our thoughts and ideas, I take that at a local level. I meet with my leadership regularly, and we, they're the ones that really know, hey, what's working well, what's not when it comes to our location. And so we talk about those things and we try them. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And, we're certainly, I am all for it. I tell my leaders all the time, hey, you're the ones that live it every day. And if you have something that you think will make this better, let's give it a go. You don't have to wait to ask me. And so, again, we give that runway there to the team, and often they change. I'm the guy that goes in sometimes. I'm like, okay, well, where do we keep this now? It used to be right here. And they're like, oh, we saved 3 steps by putting it here. And it's like, brilliant. Love it. So.
Well, Scott, listen, first off, I'm honored to introduce you to my partner, Terry Lammers. And Terry was teaching at Enterprise University today. And so he had a very large class this afternoon. And Terry, I'm glad you were able to join and meet Scott virtually before the webinar came to an end. So thanks for joining.
Yeah. Nice to meet you, Scott. Sorry I couldn't be on for the whole thing. I was disappointed. It's like, oh man, the Chick-fil-A guy's coming. They're going to do another webinar.
Oh, that's okay, Terry. It's a pleasure to meet you as well.
So, we were teaching financial ratios and working capital. So if you need any help with financial ratios or working capital, let Steve and I know.
We all have strengths and weaknesses, that's for sure.
Hey, Scott, as you, we talk to a lot of folks, a lot of business owners every single day. And, one of the common threads in the conversations now is people beginning to think about going back to normal. Do you ever envision going back to normal, or do you have a different viewpoint about that?
I think we've learned a lot. I mentioned earlier, Steve, that we've learned, I think just, from the safety of a restaurant environment, we've learned a lot on how to operate even safe, at a higher level. I don't know that we'll go backwards on some of those things, just because, God forbid there be another situation where there's this type of maybe not even pandemic, but just, a flu virus going around. I think we've learned a lot on how to mitigate some of those things. Certainly I hope the masks go away, just like everyone, but, I think, I am talking with my facilities team at Chick-fil-A Inc. I'm talking with the local planning and zoning as we speak to figure out how I can continue to do the things that we're doing now that we're using cones for long term. I would like to continue to do business the way we're doing, and I've already expressed my interest as a Chick-fil-A to not open the dining room, and that's partly a little bit of just a local. Our dining room only has I think 106 seats in it, and so it was chaos to begin with, and so it's kind of like, okay, we have a place of peace for the team. We have a place I can train, I can meet, I can actually have my team sit down and have a meal. Without being stared at by someone wondering why they're not helping them, at a peak time, Steve, I have 40 plus team members on the clock. I'm not sure we're in fire code all the time.
I know, it's amazing.
Careful what you say. This is being recorded.
Yeah, right. Chief Schneider, I'll give him, he'll probably be in the drive-through tomorrow. So, but
Terry's president of his local fire district, so that's you were speaking his language there.
Yeah. So but I think I think we're going to learn from this. I've learned that you can't always sit still, and it's even in the unknown, the times of unknown, you have to invest in thinking differently and working to make the most of it. And, I have not taken a hit in my retention during this. We've kept people employed, and, you know, I think it's says something about just how we've navigated it. And so I think we've learned a lot from a leadership standpoint. So.
Great.
Excellent. Terry, I know you've missed most of this. Were there any questions that you had for Scott before we get to the top of the hour here?
No, not really. Sorry. Just pleasure to meet you. Sorry I couldn't be on for the whole thing.
Great.
And congratulations. I mean, you did do a great job. So.
Yeah, great. Well, Steve, I think we need to start the wrap-up process. So do you want to start that process, and then I'll call on everyone to make their last and final comments before we shut down at the top of the hour?
Well, Scott, I reached out to you because I've just been, admiring what you guys have done for the last several months. And as you know, my wife and my grandkids are in your restaurant at least once a week. And if they're at our house, we're generally there every single day. So, we just think you're a beacon in the community. You're an outstanding contributor, and I think you've got so much to offer to your fellow business owners. We're just very, very blessed to have you as part of the community, and very thankful that you'd give us an hour today to chat with us about this. It's so refreshing to hear somebody that's literally taking lemons and making lemonade out of it, and to hear how well it's done is unbelievable over the last several months. So, we preach pivot, survive, and thrive, and you're the personification of that. And thank you for setting the shining star example in our community. We're very, very appreciative of that.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and appreciate you all being here to listen to, the guy with the little restaurant in Wentzville speak. So.
Okay, well, Scott, are you considering that your final word, or do you have anything else, any sage wisdom that you'd like to share with us before we close down?
No, I think the things I've learned, and just like any business owner on the line, that these times of unknown, they're stressful. One day at a time, communicate, collaborate, innovate, all those big words we talked about. But, I think the simple part of that is, you can't do it alone. And certainly these groups like yours, I have those groups of mine, and I would encourage any business owner to have them. And without those groups, it's a lonely world as a business owner. So do appreciate what you all are doing, and thank you very much for having me.
Great. Thanks, Scott. And Terry, do you have any very last words you want to say, or are we going to call it the end?
I think we're good. So nice to meet you, Scott. Again, sorry I couldn't be on for the whole thing, but it's a privilege to have you on.
Okay, with that, I'd like to say thank you to all of our participants who joined us today, and look for an email from us within the next 24 hours. We'll be sending out the recording of this webinar, and hopefully you'll have an opportunity to share it. I just really enjoyed this one today. Just so much good, insightful information in terms of what a leader really is, Scott. I mean, I'm so impressed with you in terms of how you interact with your team, because I don't even want to use the word manage. It's what you're describing is something so unique in terms of how you run your business. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, with that, Steve, you can shut it down.
All right, you all. Make it a great weekend. And Scott, I'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.